the divide between the Sussexes and the rest of the family. Currently, weirdly, we've all been there before. We've all had, excessive intrusion and attention in our lives. It has been 5 years since Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped away from their roles as senior members of the royal family. What began as a quiet decision to seek a more private life in North America has since grown into a multi-year saga that has dominated headlines, divided public opinion, and exposed deep fissures in the House of Windsor. The couple's televised interview with Oprah Winfrey in early 2021 marked a turning point, opening the door to a stream of revelations and grievances that neither the public nor the monarchy could ignore. From Harry's best-selling memoir to their Netflix docu-series, the Sussexes have redefined what it means to exit the royal fold. And in doing so, they've left the institution scrambling to adjust. Through all of this, Prince Edward remained largely out of the spotlight. The youngest child of Queen Elizabeth Roman II and Prince Philip, he has long been known for his quiet commitment to duty and a reluctance to wade into family controversies. While other royals issued statements, took on public-facing roles in defense of the monarchy, or simply became entangled in the media fallout, Edward maintained a steady course. He continued his work with the Duke of Edinburgh's award, supported youth initiatives across the Commonwealth, and offered no public commentary on the turbulence that surrounded his nephew and a niece-in-law. That silence, though, did not go unnoticed. As commentators dissected every gesture and glance from senior royals, some began to speculate about Edward's role behind closed doors. Reports surfaced suggesting that he, along with his wife Sophie, now the Duchess of Edinburgh, had acted as intermediaries at times, quietly trying to bridge the divide between Harry and the rest of the family. While never confirmed, these rumors painted a picture of Edward as a soft-spoken stabilizer, someone attempting to preserve what remained of family cohesion without adding fuel to the fire. The monarchy, meanwhile, endured a series of profound transitions. The passing of Queen Elizabeth in September 2022 marked the end of a historic reign. With King Charles Roman III ascending to the throne and the spotlight increasingly shifting toward Prince William, the roles of other royals came under renewed scrutiny. Edward, finally granted the title Duke of Edinburgh in March 2023, took on additional responsibilities with little fanfare, continuing to embody the kind of quiet duty that defined his parents' legacy. But silence only holds for so long. In recent weeks, renewed attention has turned toward Prince Edward, not because he sought it, but because the dynamics between the royal family and the Sussexes have again entered public conversation. Meghan Markle's appearance on a podcast hosted by entrepreneur James Kern-Lima on 28 April 2025 reopens old wounds in a new way. The interview, promoted as a conversation about female empowerment, quickly became a lightning rod for controversy. During the podcast, Meghan spoke openly about the challenges she faced in her acting career, the stereotypes she had to navigate, and how public life shaped her sense of identity. While she did not name any members of the royal family, the subtext of certain comments, particularly those about being silenced or expected to shrink herself, drew sharp interpretations. The timing of the appearance, combined with the personal nature of the topics discussed, fueled speculation that the Duchess was again drawing attention to the hardships she associated with her time inside the royal institution. Controversy intensified when it was revealed that a gift sent by Meghan to James Kern-Lima included a note signed with the title Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. Though technically accurate, Harry and Meghan retained their HR styles, though agreed not to use them publicly following their departure in 2020. Critics argued this violated the spirit of that agreement. The backlash was swift. Tabloids seized on the detail. Commentators questioned whether this was a calculated branding move. Supporters dismissed the uproar as overblown, pointing out that the title had not been used commercially. Adding to the intensity, this podcast followed closely on the heels of Meghan's own new series, Confessions of a Female Founder, launched earlier in the month. The project, which focuses on her journey as an entrepreneur and features other female founders, was already facing scrutiny for its tone. Some praised it as a platform for authentic conversations about leadership and identity. Others criticized it as overly self-referential and lacking nuance. With the Lima interview, tensions once again flared, not just between the Sussexes and the public, but within the palace itself. It was in this context that Prince Edward's recent remarks gained attention. While attending a youth awards ceremony in Manchester, a reporter asked him whether he believed reconciliation between the Sussexes and the royal family was possible. Edward, never one to offer sound bites, took a moment before responding. "Families are rarely easy," he said, "and ours is no exception. But we're always stronger together. I believe that. I think most people do." It was not a direct reference to Harry or Meghan. It was not a rebuke, nor was it a defense, but it was for many the first time Edward had come close to publicly acknowledging the enduring tension. His words, carefully chosen, measured, stood in stark contrast to the dramatic narratives that often surround royal commentary. There was no judgment, no blame, just an assertion that unity, however elusive, remained a goal worth holding on to. Royal correspondents were quick to point out that while Edward did not name names, the context was impossible to miss. Coming on the heels of a new wave of media attention around Meghan, and amid renewed scrutiny of the monarchy's role in shaping its public image, Edward's voice, long silent, had re-entered the conversation, and yet his tone was not confrontational. It was consistent with the role he has played for decades. Steady, understated, and ultimately more interested in cohesion than conflict, palace aides later clarified that Edward had not intended to wade into controversy. His remarks, they insisted, were a reflection of his belief in family over factions, but the public had already heard what they needed. After years of silence, the Duke of Edinburgh had said something, and that for many was enough to shift the tone. What makes Prince Edward's recent remarks resonate so strongly is the context they sit within. A family that, despite its formality and traditions, has become increasingly defined by fragmentation. The contrast between Edward's restraint and the openness of Harry and Meghan couldn't be more apparent. Where the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have chosen televised interviews, best-selling memoirs, and a growing catalogue of media projects to tell their side of the story, Edward's tone is almost intentionally unsensational. His words appear less concerned with drawing lines and more focused on keeping bridges intact, even if those bridges feel barely standing. Still, the pressure on the royal family to respond to ongoing narratives, especially those reignited by Meghan's recent podcast appearances, isn't going away. The James Kern-Lima episode on 28 April 2025 generated more than a week of sustained headlines. While Meghan's intent appeared focused on discussing her struggles with self-doubt and navigating professional life in the public eye, critics were quick to argue that her reflections echoed too closely the grievances she and Harry had aired multiple times before. The language she used about feeling dismissed and being expected to dim her light drew sharp lines in the public imagination between her past royal role and her present autonomy. Supporters argued that these themes were central to her personal truth and aligned with her work advocating for women's empowerment. Detractors accused her of continuing to leverage royal associations while publicly distancing from the institution itself. The controversy over the handwritten note bearing her HR title only added complexity. While her friend and host James Kern-Lima defended the gesture and dismissed any suggestion of wrongdoing, media outlets reignited debates about whether the Sussexes were attempting to have it both ways, benefiting from royal prestige while rejecting royal responsibilities. As the noise surrounding the interview grew, public sentiment became even more polarized. In opinion columns, some called for King Charles to formally remove the HR style from Harry and Meghan altogether, even if unused. Others urged the monarchy to finally extend a public olive branch, hoping to end the ongoing back and forth that had come to define modern royal discourse. And in the middle of it all, once again stood Edward, saying little but representing much. Observers noted how, in the face of mounting media speculation, Edward continued with scheduled engagements, showing up at community events and supporting educational programs through the Duke of Edinburgh's award. A few days after the podcast controversy peaked, he attended a ceremony for youth leaders in Liverpool where his speech focused entirely on resilience, inclusion, and opportunity. Not once did he mention the family drama swirling around him. But as one royal watcher wrote in a national editorial, sometimes the absence of comments speaks louder than any quote. The Duke of Edinburgh's approach reflects a broader philosophy that has guided much of his public life. Serve quietly, stay grounded, and avoid personal drama. Those who have worked closely with him describe a man who has long prioritized function over flair, a trait he is said to have inherited from both of his parents. Prince Philip, in particular, was known for his blunt wisdom and belief that royal service was about discipline, not headlines. Edward, while less forceful in tone, has clearly internalized that same ethos. Yet even someone so private cannot entirely remain above the conversation. With the spotlight returning once more to the fractures within the family, questions about Edward's private views have become more frequent. Though he has offered few direct comments, there are patterns in his public behavior that suggest a carefully managed position. His consistent refusal to add to controversy, combined with his occasional calls for unity, point to a man who sees his role not in picking sides, but in preserving what's left of royal cohesion. It's this perception that has in recent months made Edward a figure of growing interest. As King Charles balances royal duties with reported health concerns, and as Prince William shoulders increasing responsibility as heir to the throne, other senior royals, particularly Edward and Sophie, have become more visible. Their appearances are not flashy, but they are consistent. They attend state events, lead community projects, and handle engagements that once might have gone to Harry and Meghan. This has not gone unnoticed by the public. In several recent surveys, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh have seen a modest raise in approval ratings, especially among older Britons who value tradition and steadiness. Commentators have suggested that Edward's ability to stay above the fray may in fact be his greatest strength. While he may not be the future of the monarchy, he represents the kind of continuity that helps it weather uncertainty. Still, the expectations on him have quietly increased. In private, there are reports that Edward has been called upon to help calm internal tensions, not just with Harry and Meghan, but within the wider circle of royal cousins and advisers navigating the post-Elizabeth and royal structure. Whether those reports are true or speculative, they speak to the image Edward has cultivated, a man whose discretion is viewed as a valuable commodity in a family often overwhelmed by exposure. What complicates the narrative, however, is the way the Sussexes have framed their departure, not simply as a step back from duty, but as a conscious rejection of a system they found harmful. Meghan's podcast remarks about being told to stay quiet, or Harry's writing in Spare about feeling like the spare part of the monarchy, are not just personal stories. They are indictments of an institution still grappling with modern values, media saturation, and internal accountability. In that light, Edward's silence can be read in two ways, either as quiet wisdom or passive complicity, depending on where one stands. This is the line the Duke of Edinburgh walks in public. He talks about community, youth, and responsibility. He steers clear of media spectacles, even when they involve his own relatives. But in doing so, he has also become a symbol of the monarchy's struggle to evolve while holding on to its identity. If Harry and Meghan represent the break, and Charles and William represent the center, Edward represents the hold, the part of the royal machinery still trying to keep things working even as the system frays at the edges. By early May 2025, calls for royal unity had grown louder, with various media voices urging senior royals to find a way forward. If not for reconciliation, then at least for closure. And although Edward has not promised public engagement on the issue, the mood around him suggests that many believe he could play a quiet but crucial role. The weight of public silence within the royal family has often been just as significant as any spoken word. And when a quiet figure like Prince Edward chooses to speak at all, especially during a time when family divisions are once again headline material, it does not go unnoticed. Following the renewed attention generated by Meghan Markle's appearance on Jaime Kern-Lima's podcast and the discussion it stirred about royal expectations and identity, Edward's few but careful words have been read as a signal, one that doesn't confront, but instead acknowledges the discomfort shared by all sides. The timing of the podcast interview and the HR gift note controversy placed the monarchy back under the lens of media scrutiny. Edward, in the days following these developments, remained outwardly focused on his scheduled public duties. He continued representing the Duke of Edinburgh's award and met with young participants across several regions. He did not deviate from his standard tone. He did not reference the media noise. But it was during an exchange with journalists at one such event, casual, unscripted yet sincere, that Edward briefly addressed the broader family dynamics. His remark that families are rarely easy and were always stronger together drew immediate interpretation. There was no mention of names, there was no call for reconciliation or critique of past actions, but the mood around his words and the backdrop against which they were spoken gave them significance. Analysts quickly drew comparisons to his earlier brief acknowledgement of the family rift as very sad, suggesting this new statement was a continuation of his effort to remain principled and neutral while still human. In a media landscape accustomed to either full silence or full disclosure, Edward's tone offered something different. It was thoughtful but distant, warm but formal. And while it did not provide clarity on the status of personal relationships, it provided context, a reminder that not all responses need to be loud to be meaningful. This approach has shaped how Edward is increasingly viewed, not just as a working royal, but as someone whose reliability and absence from scandal give his occasional words added weight. In recent months, royal commentators have observed how his consistency has allowed him to gain quiet prominence. As King Charles delegates more ceremonial tasks, and as Prince William focuses on preparing for future leadership, Edward and his wife Sophie have taken on a growing number of representational roles, especially those requiring sensitivity. His remarks followed a moment where the royal family was once again being asked to define its position not officially but symbolically. Meghan's remarks in the podcast were introspective, centered on self-worth and public pressure. But the way certain phrases were received, phrases about being diminished, managed, or misread, felt familiar to audiences who had followed the couple's earlier interviews and public statements. While no accusations were made directly, the themes echoed much of the language used in previous critiques of royal life. The media narrative that followed reignited debate around the royal institution, its internal dynamics, and the question of whether healing was still possible or if the separation was now permanent. Edward did not respond to those debates. He did not enter the fray. But his brief statement, grounded in the idea of families needing time and understanding, was enough to redirect attention, if only momentarily, from confrontation to reflection. Within palace circles, Edward's tone has long been appreciated for its steadiness. He has been assigned sensitive engagements, particularly those connected to community outreach, youth development, and charitable representation. This trust is not accidental. His work with the Duke of Edinburgh's award, which has grown under his leadership to include more diverse communities and digital access pathways, reflects a clear focus on long-term social impact rather than public visibility. And in a time when many institutions are being questioned for their relevance, Edward's approach is seen by some as a quiet example of how tradition can evolve through service. Meanwhile, public interest remains fixed on what role, if any, other royals might play in repairing the family breach. Edward's consistent refusal to speak critically of Harry and Meghan, coupled with his broader calls for unity, has placed him in a unique position not as an intermediary in the formal sense, but as someone whose words carry a tone many people are hoping to hear more of. There is no evidence that Edward has participated in any reconciliation efforts beyond what has been publicly observed. There are no confirmed reports of private meetings or coordinated discussions involving him. But what the public and media continue to observe is a man who remains present, who has never withdrawn from royal life, and who has chosen to navigate the complexities of a modern monarchy without public grievance. This stance has drawn both appreciation and critique. Some see his restraint as dignified, preserving the sanctity of private relationships in a family that is above all human. Others believe that continued silence from senior royals contributes to a culture of avoidance. But Edward's consistent message that families are not easy and unity is worth aiming for has found its place amid the noise. His remarks have also prompted a broader conversation about the roles of secondary royals in maintaining stability. With the monarchy navigating new pressures, shifts in public trust, ongoing debates about accountability, and generational divides. Figures like Edward and Sophie have come to symbolize continuity. Their appearances are seldom controversial. Their tone remains aligned with tradition, and in times of uncertainty, that consistency becomes a form of reassurance. There has been no follow-up from Edward on the subject since his comment in Manchester. The palace has not issued any official clarification, and the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have continued their work without referencing the royal family directly. Yet, the tone surrounding the public discussion has slightly shifted. Not dramatically, not permanently, but enough to be noticed. Edward's moment in the conversation, brief though it was, served as a reminder that there are still voices within the institution who are choosing reflection over reaction. That for some within the royal family, service still means staying measured in the face of growing scrutiny. The narrative remains open. But for now, it's clear that Prince Edward's role as a steady presence and a soft-spoken contributor to the family's public image is more central than it appears. His voice may not be frequent, but when it does emerge, it speaks not just to a man, but to an approach cautious, grounded, and quietly invested in the hope that something resembling harmony might still be possible. The weeks following Prince Edward's brief acknowledgement of the family rift passed with little public development. The monarchy has always resumed its rhythm of duties, attending events, issuing statements on national matters, and projecting continuity. But for those watching closely, Edward's words still lingered, not because they promised resolution, but because they quietly introduced the idea that perhaps some within the family were prepared to keep the door open, even if others were not yet ready to walk through it. In a royal family shaped by hierarchy and history, change tends to move slowly. And yet the backdrop against which the monarchy now operates has shifted dramatically. Public expectations have evolved, media scrutiny has intensified. The desire for authenticity, accountability, and emotional transparency has made the royal institution feel to some increasingly out of step, and in that space between tradition and change, Figures like Edward have found renewed relevance not as reformers but as quiet stabilizers. Edward's role, while understated, has become increasingly symbolic. His presence at royal engagements has taken on a new meaning, not because he is next in line, but because his tone represents something different from the louder public narratives. He is not offering criticism, but he is not denying reality either. He continues to attend youth events, charity engagements, and ceremonial functions with the same consistency that has defined his public life. But now the weight of his calm presence carries a subtext that resonates more than it once did. Meanwhile, the conversation around Prince Harry and Meghan remains unresolved. Their projects in the United States continue, including philanthropic work and commercial ventures. Meghan's recent media appearances have generated new waves of attention, not only for what she said, but for how those words were interpreted. The gift controversy involving the HR title reignited old debates, and her podcast reflections reminded audiences of how personal and painful the couple's royal experience had been. Though no direct response came from the palace, the implications of those narratives echoed through the press. For Prince Edward, navigating this terrain appears to involve a familiar choice. Keep showing up, stay within the bounds of duty, and speak only when something meaningful can be said without inflaming further tension. Whether that approach will help bridge divides remains uncertain, but it is added to his credibility as a figure grounded in service, not spectacle. The idea of reconciliation, often discussed in the press, is more complex than a simple gesture. It is not a photo opportunity or a carefully worded statement. It requires trust, time, and the willingness to let go of past wounds on all sides. And while there has been no visible sign that such reconciliation is underway, Edward's tone suggests that there are still people within the family who value the possibility, even if they do not yet know the path. What makes Edward's position unique is that he has not had to change his image to become relevant in this new royal environment. He has simply remained consistent. As other family members face criticism, withdrawal, or reinvention, Edward's continued focus on long-term low-profile work, such as his leadership of the Duke of Edinburgh's award, has allowed him to sidestep controversy without becoming irrelevant. He has managed to grow into a public role without dramatically shifting who he is. This has led some observers to view Edward and Sophie as quietly filling a space left behind by the Sussexes' departure. Their presence at engagements, their reliable tone, and their non-confrontational style have allowed them to step into responsibilities that might have otherwise been shared more broadly. The palace has not formally acknowledged this shift, but patterns of representation have changed, and Edward's calendar now reflects that increased visibility. Still, the question remains, how much influence can someone like Edward truly have in shaping the family's future? He is not in line for the throne in any direct sense. His voice, while respected, is not the one expected to define the monarchy's direction. But influence, especially in royal terms, is not always about power. Sometimes it is about tone, presence. A quiet example: Edward's position offers something many institutions lack in moments of strain, a stable, measured voice that does not escalate tensions but does not deny them either. His few public remarks, though limited, have been interpreted as sincere, reflecting not just personal belief, but a professional understanding of how the monarchy must carry itself under pressure. It is that understanding that may become increasingly valuable. As generational change continues to shape the royal family's public perception, the need for stability grows more important. And if future reconciliation is to take place, it may not begin with dramatic returns or interviews, but with understated figures who continue to make space for quiet conversation. In this light, Edward's recent emergence in public discourse is not accidental. It is the result of long-standing consistency. He has built a role that does not compete with louder voices but complements them, His presence is not meant to dominate headlines, but to remind audiences, and perhaps the family itself, that dignity and discipline still have their place. Whether or not Harry and Meghan ever re-establish closer ties with the monarchy remains an open question. What is evident is that there are still individuals within the institution who are prepared to frame the future not in terms of confrontation but coexistence. Edward has not offered solutions, but he has left space for them to exist. In the current climate, that may be the most the monarchy can offer. A gesture and openness, a reminder that even in an age defined by public statements and fast opinions, there is value in waiting, watching, and showing up without drama. Edward has not changed the royal family's course, but he has quietly suggested that not every story must end in silence or spectacle. Some can still unfold in patience. As the public continues to reflect on what the royal family represents and what it should become, figures like Edward will matter, not because they are in line for the crown, but because they represent a version of service that is increasingly rare, steady, clear, and willing to speak carefully, not for effect but for meaning. And sometimes, especially in a family where every word carries weight, that may be enough to start mending what has long been torn. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come this far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.